Welcome all, and thank you for joining this webinar this afternoon. I'm Doreen Anderson, Senior Knowledge Exchange Manager for Dairy in Scotland. I'm joined this afternoon with our new strategic dairy farmers, Gareth and David Owen from Potstown Farm in near Lockerbie in Dumfries and Galloway, as well as Paul Flanagan, AHDB Strategy Director for Dairy in Scotland. I'd like to start with a couple of housekeeping points. All participants are muted, but you can ask questions using the chat function at the side of the screen as we go along. If we don't have time to answer all the questions during the session, we will get back to you later. All questions are private and your identity will not be displayed. If you're a Dairy Pro member, please provide your name, farm name, postcode and membership number into the message box at the side of the screen and you'll receive your points. If you do not know your membership number, please enter your email address too. Today's webinar is being recorded and you'll be able to re-watch it on YouTube should you wish. And we're aiming to finish about 1 o'clock. So due to the high demand for digital interactions and continuous coronavirus restrictions, we're holding this meeting as a webinar, but plan to run some on-farm meetings in the near future. The Owen family are the most recent recruits to join the Strategic Dairy Farm programme, and today we'll have the opportunity to hear from Gareth and David how the business started and the changes that have taken place over the years and what the plans they have for the coming years. As well as an insight into the background and operations within the business, you'll be given an open and honest view of the farm's performance figures compared with the optimal dairy system key performance indicators. Hosts Gareth and David will give you their aims and aspirations for the future ambitions and long-term vision for the business. You'll also get a greater understanding about the areas that the Owens have identified for improvement over the next few years. Paul Flanagan will give us an insight into some of AHDB's activity within the dairy industry and an overview of the Strategic Dairy Farm project. So I'm sure that you'll want to hear from Gareth now and a bit more about the farm, the herd and the people behind the business. Gareth, can I bring you in at this point, please? And can you give us some background about the business and the farm?
Thanks, Doreen. Yeah, it's nice to be here today to share the farm with everybody. A wee bit of background: we bought the 177-acre Potstown farm back in 1988 when my dad moved from the neighbouring Cushat Hill farm. He brought his 90 pedigree Holsteins with him and ran as a closed herd. I came back from college in 2004 from Auchincruive, at which point we put a new parlour in. And push the numbers up to about 130. The yield at that point was about 10,500 on twice a day milking. A few years on from that, we were looking at different ways of getting more out of the cows in the farm. So in 2012, we made the decision to buy 2 Lely A4 robots, which enabled us to get a bit more out of the cows from the same system without any more labour. That pushed the yield up to about 12,000 litres. A couple of years after that, we got the opportunity to buy the neighbouring farm, Scottsbrigg. That added about another 190 acres in. So we have now currently 367 acres, 55 of which are planted with forestry. It just made sense at the time to do. At the same time as buying Scottsbrigg, we built the new dairy shed, bought an additional 2 robots, and also imported 69 German Holsteins and bought a few maiden heifers from local farms to boost our numbers up to 250 roughly. We carried on as that, but a change of milk company in 2016 led us to question sort of what we were producing and how we could do it better. So that led us to last year in 2020 buying 100 in-calf Jersey heifers from Denmark, and that's going to hopefully make up half the herd going forward. We're a traditional farm. We're quite heavy ground, so traditionally we've been grass, silage and cake. More recently we have been growing crops. 2019 and 2020 we grew maize. this year we decided it was maybe too risky for our land, so we moved back to growing whole crop wheat. So that's a rough background, Doreen, if we want to.
No, that's lovely, thank you. So you've already been through a lot of change over the years, Gareth, and you know, you're forever looking forward as a family. So this is very much a family affair. So can you please introduce some of the individuals on this photograph?
Yes, well, this is the family unit. In the centre is my dad Tom and my mum Christine. Say Dad's been farming for quite a few years now, so he's got all the knowledge. On the right hand side of the photo is myself and my wife Annette. We got married nearly 10 years ago. In front of us are our children, Charlie, who's 4, and Chloe, who is 6. And on the left hand side of the photo there's my brother David and his wife Linda. They've been married for a bit more than 10 years now, and they're the twins Callum and Ailey, who have just turned 7.
Lovely, thank you. And I think that's certainly a lovely family photograph, and I think one to go above the mantelpiece for you. So the team then, Gareth, can you tell us a little bit about your team and the roles that they play in the success to the business?
So I say there's firstly it's me and my dad that do, you know, a lot of the on-farm management and a lot of the kind of routine day-to-day stuff, working with cows, etc. In the left-hand picture there, we have Kenny, who's been with us for 5 years. He's exceptionally valuable knowledge because before he worked with us for over 50 years, worked on his own dairy farm, and he treats this like his own cows and his own farm, so he's exceptionally valuable that way. He does a lot of the tractor work, you know, feeding of cows and you know, general day-to-day work as well. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have Jodie, who came for 3 or 4 weeks work experience 3 years ago and has never left. She's never worked in agriculture before, and has been a breath of fresh air. She's really keen to learn. He's keen on doing bits and pieces, and you know, her day to day is mainly involving the calf feeding, routine bedding and feeding. And we have, you know, she's keen to go on and do AI courses and bits and pieces like that. Also, my brother David is a partner in the farm. He does a lot of the management work and budgeting and keeping us on the right track and shouting at me when I don't do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's been great because anytime I've been there, Kenny and Jodie have been getting involved as well in the conversations, and their knowledge is really important. So we need to, you know, put them into these discussions as well. So that's lovely, thank you. So the cows, the herd, can you give us a little bit of insight into what you've got just now and you know why, I suppose?
Well, say traditionally we were a pedigree Holstein herd. You know, they're fairly high genetic merit, so it took quite a lot of time to think about importing these jerseys, but on our milk contract it was the right thing to do. So currently we're sitting about 255 cows, 90 of which are the pedigree jerseys. We have about 20 crossbreds, and the rest are all pedigree Holstein. Going forward, the jerseys are getting put to Jersey, the Holsteins are getting put to Holsteins, the crossbreds will kind of all get bred to Jersey that way. On top of that, we have 240 young stock, which are nearly bang on 50-50 split between Holstein and Jersey. Currently, they're all obviously milked on Lely robots, the 4A4 robots. We're currently averaging 27 litres a day across the whole herd. Roughly at 5% butterfat and 3.7% protein. All the milkers are housed all year round. The dry cows go outside for 4 or 5 weeks in the summer, and we sell all our milk at the minute to U-Tree dairies. So that's it's been a good decision for us as a business because it allows us to forward sell our milk. At any one time we can have between sort of 20 and 60% of our milk forward sold for anything up to 2 years. It's a different way of working, but it brings a bit of security to the business, and after a turbulent time in 2015-16 it was most welcome.
Excellent. Yeah, and one of the things that we're looking at is your young stock and what we're going to do with them going forward, because you've got quite a few around the farm at the minute, haven't you? So
Yes,
talk
it's
about calves and young stock. And you said earlier your dad, Tom, and Jodie are mainly in charge of the calves. What's the sort of protocols around the calves?
yes. Well, we try to do the gold standard for calves. Every calf will be fed either bucket fed or tube fed with 3 or 4 litres of colostrum within 4 hours of being born. That's the ideal. Sometimes, obviously, if the calf during the night, it's as close as we can get to 4 hours. Everything is bucket fed here with no calf machines or anything, so they get colostrum or second or third milkings until they're sort of 4 days old, and then they're on to powder milk. Generally about 2.5 litres twice a day, 150 grams a litre. We aim to wean everything at 8 weeks roughly, but we do it in groups, so obviously there's some either side of that. And the aim is basically to get them the best start they can to calve everything at the 24 months that we're averaging at the minute. We do have our issues with the smaller calves, both crypto and coccidiosis we've tested for, and it's something we have, something we keep an eye on, and we treat with Halocure, and the coccidiosis likes to keep on top of it. It's something that I think I'm quite interested in, to see if we can move away from the almost routine treatment and get rid of it through hygiene protocols. But yeah, that's the bones of the young stock enterprise.
Yeah, perfect. And it's something that we're hoping as a part of the programme that we're going to look a little bit more about calf health and share some of that on farm and with as an open meeting potentially in January, aren't we? There is a question come in, and I think I'm just going to ask you that just now, Gareth. What drove the decision to install robots?
At the time, as I say, we were averaging 10,500 litres, and it frankly was coming to a choice from cow health wise whether we would go to 3 times a day milking or go to robots. Robots are always something I was quite interested in, and at the time it was just me and Dad working, so it sort of made sense that we didn't have to get any extra labour in, and we could, the cows were, I felt, suited to the robotic milking system, and they took to it really well, and I'm quite pleased with that decision. But it was a labour thing, I suppose.
Yeah, good.
I'd rather have the robots than extra staff.
And you've introduced the jerseys as well to the robots, so that's been another little bit of a challenge for you as well, hasn't it, just recently? But they've taken to it?
Yeah, well, they were all obviously the ring calf heifers, because that you can't buy milking stock from Denmark because it's too far away. So yeah, we trained 100 of them between April last year and September, which was fun. We'll go with that. But they're as soon as they get the hold of it, the jerseys are really good on a robot because they know how to get fed. They know where to go.
Okay, so we're talking about the cows there. There's a comment came in as well, just to say, have you had to develop new skills as well in order to have the success from the robots? Because it's a different way of working.
Yes, I think you need to almost take a time and take a step back and go in and look at the cows, because 99% of the time it runs itself. You're in and out doing bedding and various tasks, but I think you have to take more time just for the general stocksmanship. You maybe miss that twice a day, seeing every cow going past you, and you can. Yeah. The robot does pick things up, but yeah, the human eye is still there to pick up the problems.
You're not handling them just as much the same, are you? So it's a different way of thinking. Excellent. Okay, so going on to the infrastructure then of the farm, I think we've got a super aerial photograph that was taken with one of the drones of the farmyard itself. So you can tell us a little bit about the buildings that we see here and what they're used for.
Yes, so all the stock we have currently are in these buildings that we see. Obviously the steading at Scottsbrig that we bought, we can keep 20 to 30 weaned calves up there, up to sort of 4 or 5 months old. It's not ideal, it's not a million miles away, but it's still, I would rather have all the stock in one place. So to start with, at the top of the picture there with the solar panels on is the new milking shed that we put up in between 2014 and 2015. It originally started with 246 cubicles in. After we bought the jerseys, it split up the middle, right up the middle, to 2 robots on either side. We narrowed the cubicles down to fit more jerseys in, so we now have 261. We used to have out-of-barrel feeders in there. We got rid of them a couple of years ago when we bought the feed wagon. It's something that was good in the system we had, but it was something we felt we could do without, so they disappeared. So after that, we have the silage pits in the farm, which are, if we get the photo back at the very top left-hand corner there, they are built. The original 2 were built in 2004, and the one on the left-hand side was added on in 2015. That gives us enough storage for about roughly 4,000 tonnes of forage up there, depending on how wet it is. So at the bottom right-hand corner is our dry cow and young stock shed. So in there, I've got 38 cubicles that we keep the far-off dry cows during the winter, and the near ones all year round are inside. On the calf shed and young stock shed, which was the old dairy building, it's a 1970s Atco shed, which was re-roofed in 2013 when we had the robots in there. So in that, we have the 36 individual plastic pens for the calves and 116 cubicles for young stock age, sort of 12 months up to pre-calving. And then in the picture there at the minute is what I would call my weaned calves, and also my calving pens in that shed, as well as some straw storage. So the 6 pens on that side house 2 to 6 month old calves, approximately 40 of them.
Yeah, cool. So we had a meeting on farm with Jamie Robertson, Gareth, recently, just to have a little look and just to sort of start the conversations of the calf housing and things. Can you share with us some of the discussion and the learnings that came out from that time spent with Jamie?
Yes, I say we had lucky enough to get a few hours of Jamie's time on farm. He's somebody that I've heard speak before, and he's very knowledgeable about buildings, very outspoken sometimes, but I think sometimes that's what you need to hear. It's maybe not what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. So the areas he was looking at, we had a look at the milking shed, but Jamie feels any issues in there are probably heat stress related, so possibly at the end of October. It's not something we're panicking about just now. We can have a look at that and put some monitoring equipment in there over next spring and summer, just to see what the data is before we do anything with that. The dry cow and young stock shed was probably the most pressing issue that he found. That we kind of knew it maybe wasn't vented as well as it should be, but his figures showed us that it's less than 25% of the outlet on it that it needs. So I think very shortly we'll be hiring a cherry picker and making some alterations in there. We had a look at the calf accommodations as well. There's a concern because the 36 plastic pens are obviously in the same airspace as some older heifers. He doesn't think it's a huge problem, but we were looking at positive ventilation into there to try and make sure that them calves had fresh air and try and get on top of any pneumonia issues that we're maybe having. He was also having just a look round at the general day-to-day accommodation and seeing how we could make it easier for Kenny and Jodie and myself and Dad when we're doing daily tasks. Is there ways we can make this easier? Is there's something that's staring us in the face that's obvious to an outsider, but maybe when you're doing it every day you don't notice it. It was a very interesting meeting, and the several actions will be getting done both short term and long term from that.
Perfect, and it is something that we'll be looking at, and I think a lot of it was very practical as well, Gareth, and I think it was about making the best. I think one of the main messages was about making the best with what you've got, and improving that short term, and then building the rest in investment, but that's future, as you say, for long term investment. Okay, so moving on, if I can get this to work. there. So cropping and forage and ration, could you just tell us a little bit about what you do and what you've got on farm?
Yes, so I say traditionally we're a grass, silage and cake model for feeding the cows. We wanted really to introduce a second forage into there. So in 2019 and 2020 we grew 40 acres of maize. It yielded fairly well, 14 to 16 tonnes to the acre fresh weight, which was okay, but we sort of felt we were taking it off too early, basically, because we've quite heavy ground, and the idea of waiting until November to go on with a forage harvester it's making me nervous. So this year we put 40 acres of whole crop spring wheat in, which has gone into the ration recently, and following that for next year we now have 30 acres of winter wheat in and 30 acres of hybrid rye as well. The reasoning for the rye was just to try and get more tons of dry matter per acre of forage off the ground, just to see how it goes. Ration wise, say we have a feed wagon now, so up the passageway they are fed 6 kilos of whole crop wheat, generally about 8 kilos of a moist feed, either draff or super grains, whichever I can get hold of at the time. There's 3.5 kilos of a blend going in there, along with minerals and buffer, and the rest is grass silage, which obviously depends on the dry matter content, what they're getting. See, over the last year, we've been trying to cut the concentrate use and maximise our milk from forage and increase the milk solids as well, which is it's a far cry from what we traditionally would be doing. So our average yields have dropped, but along with putting the Lely dynamic feeding module on back in February has helped us. We're now using about a tonne less of cake a day than we were probably a couple of winters ago. It's obviously helped our milk quality. The milk yield's down, but the bit in the middle is still up, which I think is the most important point to look at. And I think long term we'll have a look to see if there's any cow health and fertility benefits to feeding less concentrated feed. We're aiming roughly to get about 20 to 30% of milk from forage, which I know for grazing guys is a low figure, but I think for all year round house it's somewhere we're aiming at.
Yeah, Gareth, can you just tell us what is the dynamic feed module?
Sorry, Doreen. Yes, it's a module that the Lely computer system operates, which is essentially you put in what you're getting for your milk fat, your milk protein, and your base price for your diet and your concentrate price, and it will work out, because it works out. The Lely robots have the fat and protein monitors on them, so each cow, we know its individual fat and protein, both from milk recording and off the robots. So it will work out a milk price per cow basically and feed them to that. So it'll challenge a cow at a high yielding Holstein. It'll maybe knock a bit of cake off, see how she copes. If it doesn't over the next week drop in milk, she'll maybe knock a bit more off. And it probably saved, because beforehand we were fixed feeding them for 60 to 90 days and then onto a feed table, fed to yields from there. There was a lot of cows probably getting too much cake in that first 90 days, and then it takes a while to come off, whereas now they go onto the dynamic feeding at 30 days. Sometimes you feel it's maybe a bit harsh on some cows and you just have to take them off it, but I think it's feeding them to what they can do and challenging them to eat more forage rather than cake.
Excellent, thank you. My battery's just running low. Right, I'm going to carry on. Gareth, before we go into the business performance and look at the key performance on the farm and what the future plans could be, I'd like to give you a few minutes to gather your thoughts and talk a little bit about how we're using our social media to promote some of the events that are happening with the AHDB, and to encourage the viewers to follow us on Twitter and Facebook to keep us up to date on what we're up to. I'm going to bring Paul in now, if that's okay. And Paul, if you could just join us, please. On screen, thank you. And can you give us a little bit of an update, please, on what's happening in the world of AHDB dairy at the moment?
Fantastic. Thanks, Doreen. Good to be with you today. So I've got a couple of slides just in terms of what we're doing on strategic dairy farms. But first of all, I just want to touch on some other things we're doing at AHDB, some other priorities we're doing at AHDB. So the first one you see there in top left is a campaign called We Eat Balanced, and we did a pilot of this in January, which was pretty successful. We're obviously in January we're up against the Veganuary campaign, and we were really unpopular with some people who don't like livestock, because the campaign is about promoting the health and environmental benefits of British meat and dairy. So we nearly 500 people actually complain about this, our campaign, to the Advertising Standards Authority. Luckily, having reviewed that, then the ASA, Advertising Standards Authority, knocked them all back, so we can carry on with the messaging we've got. So we relaunched the campaign in September, just last month, with a social media campaign. And those of you that have been in a supermarket recently, there's a number of retailers that are supporting us. So if you go in the meat aisle or the dairy aisle, you'll see the We Eat Balanced messaging, beside the bottles of milk or whatever. You see some of the messages on that. We've also got adverts on a number of newspapers. So the Guardian, maybe you wouldn't expect to see meat and dairy being promoted. Some adverts within there, some on the Daily Mail online. And we've also recruited over 100 ambassadors, so farmer ambassadors, so working on social media, amplifying some of the messaging that we're doing, which has been really great. What we'll have in January, so we'll continue this campaign right through till the end of March, for the social media and the retail stuff and the media stuff. But in January, we'll have TV adverts, so the same as we had last January. So we'll be on TV for a couple of weeks with a slightly different campaign. So obviously up against Veganuary, where people are talking about some other stuff on that. But big focus for us in terms of promoting our reputation. Second thing I want to talk about is almost the flip side of that. So you can only promote a reputation where you can protect the reputation, and one of the big areas we're concentrating on is the environment. And the main thing we're doing there is working on something called the Dairy Roadmap, where we work with Dairy UK and the farmer unions on that, and on a common approach. And we've got about 25 to 30 organisations involved in that. Working in different working groups, so different working groups in terms of targets. So can we have some shorter term targets in terms of what we focus on for the industry? Data, so those of you that have done carbon audits will know there's a whole multitude of different carbon auditing tools out there. How can we pull together the data to make that sense, give us a footprint for the industry? Looking at best practices, if you're going to reduce your carbon footprint on farm, what can you do from a carbon sequestration point of view, from a genetics point of view, from a feed conversion point of view, a whole range of other. What's the best practice? What's the ones you can implement relatively easily? What's the ones that are going to give us, which are going to cost less than on that? So we're doing some stuff on that. We've also got a group looking at research and development right across Great Britain, but also looking globally to tap into what we're doing. And I'm on a call every couple of months with people from the US, from Australia, New Zealand, and it's great. We're sharing information on that and sharing what we're doing and tapping into what they're doing as well. We've also got groups in terms of advocacy for what we're doing from an environment perspective, so pushing that out, and farmer communication. And the final couple of things I just want to talk about from an environment perspective, we are doing specifically with ourselves at AHDB. So we are working with the Welsh Government to do some work in terms of modelling what a net zero farm is going to look like. So there's a number of our strategic dairy farms that have carbon audits done, but the modelling work enables us to look out, years, if not decades, to see what could be done from a net zero perspective, what's achievable, what are the particular constraints on that. So we do some stuff with the Welsh Government on that. And we're also those of you that are watching this from Scotland will know that COP26 is coming up next month. So we've done a video with the NFU and Dairy UK, just to promoting what we're doing from a dairy industry perspective, from an environment point of view. And the final thing I just want to talk about, and this I know that the Owens have already spoken to our head of genetics, Marco Winters, on this, is we have an independent role within the industry on genetics and genomics. Clearly, you've got breeding companies out there trying to sell their own, their own wares on that. We've got an independent role on that. We recently launched, just the last couple of months, an environmental cow index to go alongside some of the other things we've launched from a genetics and genomics perspective. So as part of that, we'll be working with Gareth and David on this in future meetings. So, Doreen, if you could just move on to the next slide on strategic.
I'm going to come in. Actually, Paul, there's been a question or comment from the chat. How do farmers get involved with this? You know, you've got the campaigns and you've got a lot of good stuff. We've got a lot of good stuff going on here. How do farmers get involved and be part of this and start, get involved and start promoting it themselves too?
Yeah, so if it's related to the Eat Balance campaign, where I said we did a number of ambassadors, I think probably the easiest way to do that is contact contact AHDB, or probably easier to contact your local knowledge exchange manager on that, and we'll get you involved. And then what we'll do is we'll share information with you on a regular basis, and we've got little groups just working around the country. So if anybody's interested in getting involved in that on social media, it's really important we do that. We know that when farmers go out there and share their own stories, it's incredibly powerful. What we're not trying to do is speak to people who are hate the livestock industry or hardline vegans. We're trying to speak to people in the middle who've got questions about this, who are seeing lots of stuff in the press all the time, or on the TV about environmental footprints. We're trying to hit them. So if anybody's interested, the easiest route is probably just contact your local knowledge exchange manager, and we'll consolidate that and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, perfect. And as you say, social media, it's all out there, so share it. Yeah, cool. Okay, so go on then, Paul, on to the Strategic Dairy Farm Programme itself.
Yeah, so this slide shows the network of farms we've got, and we started this, I think we started this 4 years ago, and probably 3 years ago in earnest, we really started to get farms on board. So we've got a network of 21 farms, as you can see, right throughout Great Britain here. A number of the farms who joined us at the beginning. So if you're watching this from Scotland, Willie Bailey's farm in Lanarkshire has just finished its three-year stint, and we've got the Owens farm coming on board. And while these started out as face-to-face meetings, COVID meant that clearly we couldn't do that. And I think what we learned from the COVID situation, where we had to switch to webinars instead of on-farm meetings, is we get a massive audience for that. So not only people watching live, but people watching after the event. So we were averaging about 850 views, if you add the people watching live and those watching after the event. So it gives us a much greater reach, clearly geographically, but also just helps us to, people can fit this in, when they've got a spare hour at night or whatever, or whenever suits to watch on that, and that's been really successful. So I think we've now that we're kind of moving through COVID a little bit, we are now moving to a blend of physical and digital events, but it's about creating the opportunity as much as possible for farmers to share information with each other in an open kind of discussion style experience. And from our point of view, get the research that we've got from AHDB, from other people on farm, just as quickly as we possibly can. And what this page, just thinking, specifically about the strategic farms, they're about working with the top quartile farms, against a set of KPIs, using high caliber consultants on that, and creating opportunities for knowledge. for each host farms, we'll look at the almost the Achilles heel of their business. They'll probably be great at a whole number of things, but there'll be things they'll just want to focus on and share examples of that. And this slide looks specifically at the web pages we've got. So if you haven't had a look at it, go onto our website, and for each strategic dairy farm, you will see a specific web page where you can find out much more about the farm. You find out information on previous meetings we've held. And what I would say was, if you're interested in that, if you have any questions, again, contact your local knowledge exchange manager. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and do that. We'd be delighted to speak to you about that. And if you're interested in any area of that, then dive into that website and see what we've got. So I think I'm back to you, Doreen.
Yeah, and even more important, if anybody else wants to become a strategic dairy farmer as well, we do have the opportunity for anybody that wants to get involved to become one as well. We've got some spaces.
One thing I just forgot there, Doreen, is that we're in the process of recruiting specific environmental strategic dairy farms. One in Scotland, one in Wales, and one in England. So we will look at that, and I suppose that will be the short window for what we're doing on the environment, but also I think be a magnet for policymakers and government and people just to get involved in specifically what we're doing. So we're in the process of doing that. So if you're interested in the environment, then again, get in touch, speak to your local knowledge exchange manager.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Okay, we're going to move on, and we're going to bring David into the conversation. I'll bring Gareth back in. So we're going to have a little bit looking at the business itself, so attention to detail and very much about measuring to manage. So in order for you to manage your business properly, you need to know your business inside out, and this is something that you guys work really hard at and have a lot of data that's around you. So David, I'm going to come to you. What are you collecting and using to drive your business forward?
What are we not collecting? And I don't think this is just us. Obviously, I'm wearing multiple hats, but I'll try and keep it to a farm. But there might be elements of this of do as I say, not as we do. But we'll cross them when we get to them. I was just trying to write a list of data sources we've got. I've actually got to 26, so I'm not going to bore you with all of them. But they run through everything from like the Lely software through to CIS information, through to bank accounts, accounting, soil scanning. There's a whole load of stuff. It's actually gone down during the meeting because I was looking out the window as a Jersey tearing my weather station down. So we're scratched one set of data already. So we've got we as a farm we have a lot of data. I think we just query how we use that data and how we use short-term data, long-term data differently, and how we pull it all together actually to create a strategy or not, as the case may be. I think, and ironically, people probably look to me as kind of the consultant person to kind of drive it. Dad's listening to this webcast just now. He's been at both of us for about 6 months, and we singularly failed to do it. Is have a sit-down meeting every month, just to go through the data. I think that's probably one of the biggest keys for us in how we don't use the data at the moment. We use it to make some decisions, but we don't communicate it and kind of tie the data together that way.
Excellent. Gareth, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's just echoing what David says. I probably should have introduced him at the beginning as having his own consultancy business, rather than just bossing me about. But no, I would fully agree. I think there's data use. It almost comes that there's too much, and you need to focus in on what you're using. And we're probably guilty of firefighting with data rather than sitting and planning with data, if that makes sense. And it's something that I probably want to get on top of and use more to our advantage going forwards.
Yeah, you can have far too much, can't you? And then you lose sight of it and you just don't do anything with it. But we're going to move on here around the KPIs that we've got. So you can see here that the results that we gathered for Potstown, having their data through the KPI Express tool. This is a tool that AHDB are using for all the strategic dairy farms. It's certainly the first step to comparing your performance to others, to highlight areas of strengths and weaknesses in your farm in comparison to other farms. We're using KPIs throughout the Strategic Dairy Farm programme. These KPIs that you see here just now are for the all year round calving herds, and shown here are 5 technical and 3 financial KPIs that are displayed in the table. We're going to just take a quick look at a couple of these in more detail today and talk through these with Gareth and David, at what they feel is behind these results and what they can do and where they could look at to aim to achieve these and improve them. So the first one we're going to look at, Gareth, is fertility. Fertility is something that you wanted to look at as part of the strategic plan journey. How do you feel you're performing now? It's going to improve these results. Your preg rate at the minute is 16%, and you're looking at a target of between 20 and 25%. What changes are you going to make on farm, do you think, to achieve this?
Yeah, well, historically we did sit at 20 to 25%, and that was one of my worries, that we actually moved from an older building to a newer building and the pregnancy rate has dropped, which is, you know, it's surprising. There's other bits and pieces in that time frame that we started using exclusively sex semen, which I think is probably knocked the rate to first service down, which in theory will knock your pregnancy rate obviously as well. It's something we need to get back on track on, because getting in an all year round calving system, you just want the cows having that calve every year and getting that as tight as you possibly can to keep your milk nice and level. And obviously if somebody comes onto your farm like Doreen did and asks you what do you want the meeting on, I would guess 99% of dairy farmers are going to answer fertility and mobility as the 2 big issues that are there. So, you know, pregnancy rates I feel is one of the best indicators of what you're doing there. So it's something we need to use the data to find where it's going wrong and where we can improve.
Yeah, perfect. And you can see on the bottom of that screen there's the little gauge on the red, amber and green, and that's the result out of the KPI tool. So it's an instant, where am I green, could I do better, etc, etc. So it's a starting point. As you say, you then need to delve into what's into the numbers and what could good look like, and what good look like for you is the most important thing. So we'll go on to the financial side then, and David, I'm going to bring you back in here. This is the full economic net margin. Now you're in a good position on here. So there's a lot of numbers behind this number though. So what do you think? You know, good looks good, but how are you going to thrive to do better?
Yeah, I mean a full economic net margin is quite an interesting one, and it's definitely a useful tool for any farm to do. I think you've just got to be a bit careful how we use that number comparing to other farms, because obviously every farm is massively different. I think most farms would have it in common with us as well. Just because we've got a net margin doesn't necessarily mean we've got the cash flow that shows that margin. So I think it's really using that as a baseline for this farm, and trying to tie in some of the decisions made short, medium, long term, using the data, using all the communication management groups we have, but trying to assess any current decisions and how they affect that margin going forward. So a good example would be the genetics and the genomics that we're looking at using. So trying to tie that back into a budget is normally what I would look to do, certainly at home. So yeah, it's going to cost you something to start with, and it's going to cost us something in year 1, probably year 2, but actually where's the benefits years 3, 4, 5, 6, and actually write them down and pin them down to this is what we hope to achieve and this is what the effect on that economic net margin should be. So I think it's important for any farm to do that, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong, or just do it on a consistent basis, and it gives us something to monitor against, I think.
Yeah, and an important part you said there, you know, you're comparing yourself on, like, so this graph here shows you the national average, but you don't really know what is behind it. The most important thing is comparing yourself and benchmarking yourself year on year against yourself, and seeing what you're doing right and where the areas are that you could do better. There's a question in here about forecasting for the winter and the areas of concern, obviously with prices of concentrates and things. What are you doing just now to mitigate this?
Panicking.
Because we've been fixing our milk in over the last few years. So obviously you can't fix your milk price in without fixing your feed price as well. So we try to go as far ahead as we can on the feed prices. Trying to get any feed company to go beyond 6 months is difficult. So if anybody wants a challenge, there's a go. But fertilizer, I'll admit, I normally buy it this time of year, and we have no cover at the minute. So there's decisions to be made over the next wee while whether we dip our foot in a little bit to cover ourselves or come up with a separate plan if it stays as high.
Good, and I think these are going to be conversations. Yeah, come in, David.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think as a yew tree farmer, because we take part in the futures offerings, we have to be reasonably good at our cost of production. So we have to know what we can commit to because we're going to fix a milk price. So I think it's something we've been relatively good at because of the futures offered by yew tree. I think is that fair, Gareth?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to ask this question just now. I've got some questions that are coming in. What's the one data set that you couldn't do without?
It'd be the robot data. Basically, that's the day-to-day running of the business. It's the data that comes out of that Lely system is phenomenal. You've got all your cow health merits and your heat detection, as well as obviously the milk and any small problems that are within the cow's quarters, because you're not seeing the milk, and it's incredibly important to be on top of that. And without that, we wouldn't function for very long, I wouldn't have thought.
Excellent. And David, for you, more on a figures side of things?
On a different note, yeah, I think because Gareth looks after the technical side, he gives me more credit. He does look after the financial side as well, but I think the zero data is fantastic. Just pulling in the bank statement every day. It's just that check, isn't it? And just making sure we know where we are financially.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'm going to move on. Just something that we're doing at AHDB, the Farm Business Review, and it is available free of charge on the website for any business to go in and log in and put their information in. The KPI Express tool, which the calculator, which we've just been talking about, but there's also an extra 2 tools in there as well that's looking at the BPS impact calculator. That's obviously more relevant at the minute down in England, and we're very much, there's a resilience fund work that we're doing just now with consultants through AHDB, David being part of that as well, with his other hat on, and that's there to help people at the minute. If anybody's interested, get in touch with your you'd be better phoning the helpline, but phone somebody from AHDB and we'll point you in the right direction. So moving on then to the two of you then, looking to the future. Planning ahead is something that you're always doing as well. You're looking at what's today, but you're also looking forward, never stopping and standing still. We've discussed some of the key areas that you want to focus on as an AHDB strategic dairy farm. Can you tell us a little bit about what good would look like for you?
Yeah, so we're basically, it sounds a bit dull, but a bit samey answers that a lot of people would put in, but that is the core of our business written right there, is maximising what we can get from the cows and heifers, making them last longer would be the obvious one in there. That links into the fertility and mobility within them. And I think that the heifer performance is particularly important because we have so many coming through. We either need them to be in good condition when they calve in to either milk them, or if they're surplus to requirements to sell them. The homegrown forage thing is obviously, that's the best way of keeping your costs down, is to maximise the use from that, and it all leads into that bottom box and the profitability of the business.
Perfect. Good. David, do you want to add anything to that, or do you think we've covered it in those 4 comments?
I think it's pretty much covered, and it's just trying to gather that data now. So I think we just need to be careful we're not knee-jerking anywhere. So for instance, the forage, we're trying some increased area, but what we've also done is we've soil scanned through Hutchison's service, the whole farm, the TerraMap service. So we've got everything from pH, P&K, and we've even done a couple of fields on carbon. Don't think there's any, it's not data we would generally say this is what it is, it's just to have a baseline going forward. So I think, but tying in that carbon element to things going forward as well, I think is fairly important. But again, as Gareth says, it all ties into profitability, be it carbon, environmental, it all has to pay its way.
Excellent. Okay, so we're on to questions. There's only one question at the minute, I think. Oh no, hang on. So the other one is, you mentioned about milk from forage. Is that something that you really push for, and especially now with the concentrate price and things, is that something that you're going to push a little bit more for going forward, Gareth?
Well, I think we're at a level now that I'm happy with it now. So you know, we can always improve. I don't think you can ever rest on your laurels, but I feel it comes to a point where they can't actually eat any more forage. So it's how do you get the best on top of that, you know, return wise. There's something I never mentioned, the genomics, Doreen, on top of back in there was, you know, Paul mentioned it as well, the genomic testing. Obviously, I mentioned earlier we're fairly high genetic merit in the Holsteins. So if we're going to have surplus heifers, that is something, you know, we need to know. And I think going forward, that's the best way of finding out, is to genomically test over young stock and make breeding decisions from that. And also we're going to try and do the jerseys as well. So obviously they're all imported, they are pedigree, but we don't know the backgrounds really. So Marco from AHDB's got me quite excited, because he thinks he can do a breed comparison between the two, and going forward it would enable us to make any breeding decisions, whether we move further towards the jerseys or even back to the Holsteins, if that was the right thing to do financially.
Yeah. And we're going to start as well going forward getting more data by splitting out the two individual herds as well in more detail, aren't we? And hopefully looking at to be able to share some of that as well going forward through the programme. There's just one more question that's came in just about better communication. David, you mentioned it about not, you know, having that monthly meeting. Is it something that you should share and communicate with the staff as well? Is that something you've got, you have your staff meetings, or do you have staff meetings, or is that something that you could be you're smiling, you should be looking at?
Yeah,
it's definitely.
So I was just going to say, Gareth, I think I'll historically say there has been communication, but I think, to be fair to him, he's starting to realise there probably isn't good enough communication. Is that just to land you in it?
Yeah, it's something going forward we need to do. I mean, I do a yearly appraisal with the staff members. I think given the nature of that conversation, it's as awkward for the staff sometimes as it is for ourselves. But I think that needs to be more, more like 6 monthly at least. And yeah, I think they probably need to be made more involved in some decisions. I think sometimes it's dropped on them, with fairly short notice of stuff we're doing. And I think getting their input into it's definitely a thing that we need to do more going forward.
And interestingly, we spoke about this right at the beginning. So we do have something in the pipeline, don't we, between us, that we're going to look at the communication, existing communication, and what that looks like from a family perspective as well as a staff perspective. So yeah, I'm quite sure it's common within family businesses. Super. Right, I'm going to move on, given that we're just about bang on time, to be honest. A little bit of what's coming up. So face-to-face dairy in Scotland, we have some planning for profit workshops that are going to be taking place in 2 different levels. Level 1 is going to take place at the Junction 36 Rural Auction Centre of the M6, but we have got level 2 on the 11th and 15th of November at Hetland Hall, and that's going to be about digging deeper into your own businesses, and if you've got potential plans of going forward, we'll have a look at that as well. And so if anybody's interested in that, please get in touch with myself. The 1st of December, the Millins Strategic Dairy Farm, which is in Ayrshire, we're going to be looking at deviating from targets, the why and what are realistic targets. And then the next on-farm meeting for Potstown is going to be on the 13th of January, and we're going to be looking at calf health. More details to follow. We've got one more slide, so just a summary then for everybody. what's next. If you want to, you'll get a follow-up email of this recorded webinar with links to the Strategic Dairy Farm web pages. I encourage you to take a look because there's a lot going on across the country, and as Paul said before, we're doing quite a lot on the digital platform, so you can tap in to something that's happening in Cornwall, Devon, even if you're in the north of Scotland. Look out for the social media updates and encourage you to copy and share and get involved as well. And I did mention at the beginning about Dairy Pro memberships. So there is a link there on the Strategic Dairy Farm and looking at everything that we're doing across the board with the AHDB Dairy. I'd like to thank you all for your time, your participation and attention. And I've got goodbye on there. Gareth, David, is there anything else that you want to add just before we close off? And I'll just check if there's any more questions come in.
Not really, Dorian. Just to mainly say, I'm quite excited about this. I'm really looking forward to getting people back on farm and getting some ideas, because it's always good to keep your business moving. And just because you've done something for the last 10 years doesn't mean it's the right thing to be doing for the next 10 years. So. Yeah,
cool. David?
Yeah, no, just much the same. I think it's good to be challenged from ideas from outside, and you know, I don't think it's fair to say we've stood still for the last 10 years, but it's certainly be good to get some outside input and see what areas we can challenge a bit more.
Yeah, lovely. Paul, if you're still there, do you want to come in just now? And just to actually add to that as well, I am really looking forward, because I know you two are going to challenge me as much as anything, but it's about getting farmers involved and including them. And we have got a little group just now, even just starting that conversation in the background. Paul, is there anything else? You've been in the background listening to us. Is there anything you'd like to just add just to finish off?
Yeah, I'll try to say something different than what you guys have said. So I think these strategic dairy farms are the lifeblood of what we're doing within AHDB. They allow us to get research onto farms as quickly as possible. Will allow us to pull in experts from AHDB and to help the host farmers and to help the group that's engaging with us. So they're critical. You know, in some ways that are short window for AHDB right out throughout the different parts of the UK. I think you've got, you know, in Gareth and David, you've got some people who are really enthusiastic about this, who are prepared to challenge us, but also there's going to be a benefit of, you know, I guess what I would say to anybody who's in the local area, you know, get involved in this, because it's not only going to be Gareth and David driving the bus on that. You know, if you want to get involved and be part of this group, then come up with ideas, and we'll look at that on the farm in terms of what we're going to do. But yeah, listen, we've got two really enthusiastic hosts there. We've got a lot of experts in HDB. We can pull in consultants where we need to pull gaps, and yeah, it's looking pretty exciting so far. I don't want to set the expectation up too much, Gareth and David, but it's looking pretty exciting so far for how this strategic dairy farm is going to look.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Gareth, David and Paul, for today. Thanks everybody for listening. If you're interested in following the story, please go online and follow not just us, but the other strategic farms that are also part of this programme. You can look out for updates on social media. We hope you'll be able to join us when we get back out on farm in a little bit and help the Owens to achieve their goals over the next 3 years. Thank you and goodbye.